Hi there, it's me, Matt Lane, co-host of Because of the Universe, and it seems like you have missed a show, but don't worry, here it is. We hope you enjoy it.
Your award-winning student radio station.
This is your role.
Good morning, it's 11 o'clock on Saturday and you are listening to Because the Universe, your fortnightly satirical science radio panel discussion show. Incredible wonderfulness, it's really exciting. We're going to have some really interesting discussion today. But let me introduce your co-host. You've got him, Harry Manners, Mr. Manners. He is the chief priest of all things argon neutrino detector related and senior professor of everything sci-fi related.
Oh, well, thank you very much. And he is Matthew Lane, currently moonlighting in the back streets of London, pursuing a pop star career under the alias Adele Dazeem.
That's me, is it?
It is you.
So, yeah.
It's going to be a good show.
That is completely true, everyone, by the way.
Indeed.
Anyway, like I said, this is Because the Universe, so we're going to be talking about some strange science today.
We are.
We've got two brilliant guests. We'll introduce you to them later on. But for now, Harry, we're going to be running a bit short of time, as always, so let's get right on with the news, shall we?
Yeah,
we'll
sounds
introduce
great.
the topic later, but let's go on with the news.
So, as usual, we're going to start off with our serious news and get that out of the way so we can go on to something more interesting. So, first off, I want to talk a little bit about our first organ transplant, which has been carried out in the UK from a newborn infant who unfortunately died due to birth complications, but has successfully donated her kidneys and liver to live patients on the donor list. So this is something which is going on as a big push in neonatal wards across the UK, and it's hoped that we can really reduce the donor list through alternative.
So when you say it's the first organ transplant, you mean from a
newborn who unfortunately passed away due to complications. But despite the incredible small size of her organs, she's managed to actually give. In the case of the liver, it was cells only, and it was used as a graft essentially. In a live patient, and it's hoped that this can be used not only in other infants but in adults as well.
And so, like you say, this is going to be good for reducing waiting time, I assume, and things like that.
Absolutely, and of course you have the problem that when you have newborns or infants under 2 years old who have defects, who are born with organ defects, we have a problem that you can't deal with transplants from adults.
Oh, well, that's good news. I've got I'm going to chip in with some amusing stuff now.
Right.
I think you're going to enjoy some of these. You may remember a while ago we talked about the Australians were developing a new beer. That it had some electrolytes in it, and the result of putting these electrolytes in the beer meant that you didn't get so drunk. So for anyone that drinks alcohol, this was good news.
I remember.
Yeah, I remember you were quite happy about it.
I was quite intrigued, yeah.
Well, there's another beer. We're going to talk about another beer. It's an Icelandic beer.
Oh.
People will have seen this. It hit Facebook. And the key ingredient in this Icelandic beer, endangered whale testicles in the beer.
Endangered?
Endangered.
How so?
Well, as in the whale is an endangered species.
Oh, I see.
And so they're killing them to harvest their testes.
Right.
To make beer. And there's outrage, there's uproar about it.
I would imagine so. This is similar to shark fin soup, isn't it? There's no functional reason, really, no necessity, just because.
And it literally is. It literally is just because. I mean, it's not really that similar, but it kind of feels a bit similar in that it involves testes. Rare earth elements.
Yes.
They're rare.
They are rare,
as in the name, and they're very difficult to process.
Right.
But they're key. They're in smartphones. They're in all electronic devices. And the problem is the environmental impact of trying to make these things, produce them, get them out of the ground, process them is huge. So we need a new way of doing it. And researchers in Japan have come up with a more environmentally friendly solution for refining and recycling rare earth elements. Guess what it is?
Go ahead.
Salmon sperm.
Salmon sperm?
Mm-hmm.
So this is a method of recycling REMs, is it?
I'm not entirely sure how it works, but there's something in the sperm, and essentially they're just collecting it. It's called silt. They're just collecting vast quantities of it from salmon farms, and then using it to process the rare earth elements.
I see. Yes. Well, that's
really know
comforting.
what to say.
So
It's
when you
just-
buy your next iPhone, you can be
You know
confident that
yeah.
at least some of it is composed of salmon sperm.
Salmon sperm.
Excellent.
But I mean, it just goes to show you never quite know where the next useful resource is going to come from, do you?
I have
something?
another story.
Go
Yeah.
on.
So I want to talk a little bit about graphene. So anyone who's unfamiliar with it, it's a new wonder material which has just been kind of discovered. It was actually discovered a long time ago, but now it's finding real-world application. And a new paper has been published in Nature Science. And it reports a Spanish team has managed to magnetize graphene, and this has unveiled a myriad.
They've managed to magnetize it.
Yes.
How on earth did they do that?
Well, what they've done is they've essentially dropped bits of iron into the monolayer. So graphene is essentially a carbon allotrope. It's a monolayer, so a single layer
So you've got
of
sheet
graphene.
by sheet of carbon.
Yes.
And then it's layered upon
Yes.
layer. Yeah.
And has incredible properties. But what they've done is they've dropped little islands of iron into this monolayer, and it gives it an increased spin orbit interaction by a factor of 1 million.
1 million?
Yeah. And this is essentially going to give graphene the ability to be interwoven into digital storage, semiconductors,
Oh, wow.
quantum computing, but you have also in tandem with these properties all the properties that graphene also has. So, the incredible conductivity, heat resistance, all this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So this is going to revolutionize semiconductor physics and solid-state physics.
Everyone's been saying for a really long time graphene is going to change everything.
Absolutely, and this is just another avenue by which it can now do that.
Yeah. How many more news stories have you got, Harry?
I have one more.
You have one more? Okay, I'm going to do one more as well.
All right.
I just want to talk about the article, the paper that was published about the speed of light no longer being constant in a vacuum.
That I would say that's worth mentioning.
Because it's actually really frustrating in that we read it.
We did.
And we knew exactly what it was talking about, and there is no way that article should have been published in the way that it has been.
No.
And so the argument that's been put forward is the speed of light has been measured in a vacuum. So in a vacuum, the speed of light is always c, about 3 times 10 to the 8 meters per second.
Yes.
And that's a constant. It's a universal constant that doesn't change anywhere, anytime. And then what they've said, oh, we've got it going slower than that.
Yes.
And that would be a rewrite the textbook kind of thing. They haven't got it going slower than that at all. What they've got is they've probably got 2 light pulses, and they're utilising the wave-like nature of light, and it's interfering in such a way that you have something called the group velocity, which is going slower than the actual speed of light. So what they're receiving is an interfered package of light. It isn't actually just the light. So the light is still travelling at c. It's this group velocity that is, and this is really old.
It is. This is by no means a new concept.
So it's very strange that this is suddenly on.
Well, I think it's just another case of what we always see, which is people who don't quite know what they're talking about reporting on things in a sensationalist manner. Technically, the article is correct.
It's not wrong.
It's not. It's not incorrect. But unless you already know what you're talking about, you will be tricked into thinking that there's been some kind of miraculous discovery.
Indeed.
Yes. Okay, and final story from me today is the first artificial pancreas has been transplanted. Yes, it's been transplanted into a 4-year-old boy in Perth, Australia. So this device, which costs about $10,000 Australian dollars, so incredibly cheap compared to these, medicines and so forth. So some pharmaceutical companies will charge an arm and a leg for some kind of treatments. It automatically regulates insulin, so it uses some kind of tracking algorithm, and it will measure blood sugar levels, and it will automatically deliver insulin on its own accord, and this rids parents of things like guarding against night hyperglycemia and things like that. It also means this child may be able to even enjoy high carb and sugary snacks like chocolate, which are usually completely forbidden for type 1 diabetics. So this is another step forward in the kind of implementing medicinal. That's a hard word.
It is a hard
medicinal
word.
implants into the human body.
This is a really exciting one, isn't it? I mean, it's in relatively early stages in terms of where this tech is going to go. It can't adjust the amount of insulin delivered, so it's only ever going to give you the same amount of insulin, or stop
essentially administer the doses of its own accord.
But what it is doing is it's changing the interval between dose. So this is great. I mean, it's a real step forward.
I mean,
in terms
having
of
seen some diabetics and being around them and the regularity and just the inconvenience of having to carry the insulin around with you to inject at certain times, even the pain of injection never goes away. It's a very uncomfortable thing to do.
Yeah.
It just seems like a wonderful thing.
Yeah, so I have a quote here on it. The pump can predict and prevent a hypoglycemic attack around 30 minutes before it happens. So this is a
That's excellent.
Really great leap forward. Right, Harry,
Yes.
let's break for a song, and afterwards we'll introduce the guests and bring in the topic.
Your student radio station on 12:51 a.m.
This is your role.
Hi there, we're back. This is Because of the Universe, your fortnightly satirical science discussion show, and we're now going to bring in the guests so that we can introduce the topic and maybe chat back over any of the news that they found particularly interesting. So let's do that. Let's bring in the guests. Let's see who we've got. Keyan, tell me a little bit about yourself, your year, what subject you're taking, and give me a truth and a lie.
Sure. So I'm Keyan. I'm in second year studying MORSE.
What is MORSE, for people who don't know?
Maths, operational research, statistics, and economics.
Okay.
So,
and what's your truth and a lie?
Truth and a lie. So I speak semi-fluently either German or Hindi.
Ooh.
So we have to pick one of those.
Yeah.
Pick one of those.
Okay. Either German or Hindi. I think you speak German. I don't know why.
No, you see, that would be... Ooh.
I just think he does. I think it's... Yeah. I think it would suit him speaking German. Not that there's anything tyrannical about it.
Semi-fluently. Wait, what do you mean by semi-fluently?
Not fluently. Not 100% fluently.
Are you conversant? Can you have a conversation with a native?
With a native.
A small conversation.
Okay, I'm gonna say I think you speak German.
Yes, me too.
Yeah, you're correct.
Hey.
Get in there. All right, Ben, same for you. Tell us what you do, who you are, your year, and give us a truth and a lie.
Well, hello, my name is Ben. I'm a second year biology student, and for my truth and a lie, I would say, so I collect dove feathers, and
Okay.
I have a third nipple.
Okay.
I think that's
a well. I'm going to say the dove feathers.
It's true.
Yes.
I'm going to say the dove feathers.
Because if you admit to having a third nipple on the radio, I will be very impressed.
I'm very relaxed about my mutation, I guess.
So you're saying that you have a third nipple?
Yes, I do.
You do?
I find doves are
well done to you.
I find doves are hard to come by, I think, and collecting feathers, the process of extracting a feather as well.
I see.
I'm absolutely amazed.
I am impressed. Well.
We have a celebrity on the show.
You do find sometimes people may get 2 extra, but for just one, that is quite...
Really?
Wow. It's quite rare.
Fascinating. I'm going to Google that later.
Yeah.
Please do, yeah.
Right, so anyone who's listening, we're going to introduce the topic now. Because the universe is the brainchild, really, of Ducky the soft duck, me and Harry are the co-hosts, the co-presenters. Ducky,
disciples,
this is really...
essentially.
We are his disciples, yeah. So if you're looking in on webcam, if you can see us at the moment, then you'll be able to see Ducky is sitting there surveying us.
Yes.
So I'm going to go to him now, and he's going to tell me what our topic this week is. Okay, thank you, Ducky. That's good. He just whispered in my ear. So our topic this week, the question we're going to be discussing is, can science save us?
Can science save us?
What on earth does that mean?
I'm not sure. So what's he referring to there? Is that some kind of catastrophe?
Well, it's obviously not going to be, is science our saviour, putting science on a plinth.
No. So
we're not fond of that here. We don't like that. So I reckon that's going to have to be looking at the greatest threats to humanity and whether they have scientific solutions.
Well, would you believe...
We do have 2 relatively relevant guests.
We do have the perfect guests for
do.
This topic.
Every week. It's really convenient. Every single week. Okay.
I don't know how.
So can science save us? I could really go to either of you to try and, start talking about start identifying some of these things that we need saving from. But instead, I'm going to go over to Harry Manners, who's lived a longer life because he's really old. So Harry, as an older man who has experienced more life, what would you say the big threats to humanity are?
Well, I'm just going to refer to all of the mass extinctions that I've lived through over the years. We've had several mass extinctions of life on Earth throughout the ages. We have the Permian extinction, the Cretaceous extinction. The most popular one would be the one that killed off all the dinosaurs. So we know that major catastrophes do occur naturally, even outside of the bounds of all the kind of cyber worries that were going on here.
So ignoring things like nuclear Armageddon.
Indeed, yeah. So man-made threats or anything like that, we do have a plethora of natural disasters which can genuinely eradicate most of life on Earth. And they are periodic in nature. So there's nothing we can do to stop them. They're inherent to the planet that we live on, the reality of the universe and the way it's built. Things go wrong. It's also, I think, vital for life that natural disasters occur. Yeah. It fosters, evolution and natural selection. You also essentially clear the playing field every now and then. And you end up with, indeed, yes, you have a massive, you leave a vacuum, which is then filled by an explosion of diversity.
Okay, so there are those, maybe we'll call them obvious, there are those obvious disasters, those things that we all can think about. There's earthquakes, there's tsunamis, there's asteroid impacts.
Asteroids, supervolcanoes, all this kind of thing.
So shall we talk about those, or shall we identify some obscure ones as well?
I think we can pick out some more obscure ones and we'll return to the... to the elephants now.
Because there are some and by obscure I just mean either less obvious or non-natural.
Yes, because there may be some that people just have never heard of.
Yeah. So right now, we've got bee decline, honeybee decline.
Ah, yes. This is a famous example.
So I mean, we will talk about this because this is happening right now. So it's actually very relevant.
Yes.
That's something. If you lose your pollinator, what are you going to do for crops?
Absolutely.
Not much.
Nuclear Exactly. Yeah. Not much.
Yes, not much.
Stuff, really, aren't you?
Yes.
So we will talk about that. Nuclear Armageddon.
Yes, absolutely.
That has a much. That's not even remotely just scientific. That's got a huge social aspect to it, a huge political aspect to it.
Yes, absolutely.
Bioterrorism.
Bioterrorism is a big one.
Loss of topsoil is a thing that nobody thinks about, that just if you are very aggressive in your farming, then you're going to completely lose all of that topsoil.
You'll deplete, you won't
be able to put anything in it again. A natural pandemic, I suppose, would be the obvious example. The less obvious example would be resistance.
Well, resistance, yes, absolutely. And you also have
resistance.
So you also have things like AI.
Yeah.
AI is a huge topic for many sci-fi stories,
and we will do a show on that. I'm not sure if we're going to fit that in this term. It might be next term.
No.
Didn't Stephen Hawking a few months back?
He did. He formulated a huge précis on that. Also, something I'd like to mention is the EMP.
Yeah.
Something, it's any kind of danger to our electrical grid or electronic networks.
So on that subject, solar flares and cosmic rays.
Solar flares, cosmic rays, absolutely. Coronal mass ejections. So there's a great many things.
Climate change, overpopulation, underpopulation because fertility rates are falling.
Yes, absolutely.
Aliens.
Aliens, yeah. Trying not to mention aliens.
Asteroid impact. And anything else that we don't yet know about.
Absolutely unknown.
The unknown.
It can always be unknown, yes.
It can always be the unknown. So there's a huge list.
Yeah.
Somehow we sound quite chirpy.
Yes.
We all sound in good moods, and this could kill us, and this could kill us. And
absolutely, everything
so
could kill you.
We're all alive right now, so
so we have to live every moment,
Wonderful.
don't we? Yeah. So Keyan and Ben, I don't mind which of you wants to talk. So just talk over each other, and whoever wins can talk.
I see.
What of those strikes you? Let's start with the obvious ones. What of those strikes you as a real problem for now, a big problem?
Well, one thing that immediately comes to mind is antibiotic resistance.
Yeah.
So examples that's been affecting us, I think it was the US Center for Disease in 2009 said that 23,000 Americans, so 2012, 23,000 Americans died as a result from antibiotic resistant bacteria. World Health Organization 2010, 500,000 people contracted resistant TB, and a third of those people died.
Whoa.
So
yeah,
it is.
I mean, you just said that.
That's quite off the cuff. That was said. Yeah,
and it was very. This.
So
say that again.
Well, okay. So 500,000 people in the world, 2010, contracted a resistant form of TB. It was resistant to antibiotics. A third of them died.
So normally, I don't know about this. So fill me in. Normally, can we treat TB?
Yeah, I mean it's generally very comfortable. I mean, you don't hear anybody in the modern world having TB, do you? So it's something that's
It was one of the first things treated by antibiotics.
And
wasn't
you
it?
would treat it with antibiotics, and then this is a antibiotic-resistant strain.
Yeah.
And how many people did you say died?
So a third of 500,000. That's over 150,000 people.
Yeah. And
wow, scary.
Cause for concern. But
and I mean, we've seen whooping cough appeared again.
Yes,
didn't
yes.
it? Just recently,
smallpox is making a resurgence, and they're making a huge push to eradicate that for a second time.
Measles in Disneyland.
Yes,
because the Americans are refusing to get vaccinated. There's the anti-vaxxers movement.
Yes.
So I mean, this is a real
danger
threat,
yes.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Especially because there is no other mechanism by which we combat bacteria, because there is no medicinal equivalent.
Oh, I see the biologist raising his eyebrows.
I mean, there's interesting things going on. So it's something that originally came from the USSR. There's something called phage therapy. Essentially, they use bacteriophages. These are viruses that target bacteria in order to eradicate. Although there's problems with it being arguably too accurate in its attempt to target bacteria, and it's still ongoing. I was talking to a PhD student a few months back their research is on that. But then essentially, antibiotics were trying to target specific proteins, and of course the problem is mutations can change those proteins. They can change receptors. So the antibiotic can't bind specifically to a point, so it's sort of the bacteria goes under the radar. So there's the recent antibiotic that's been in the news.
So we talked about this 2 weeks ago in our last show. We talked about this in the news, but that was just in the news. So you as a biologist, could you tell us a bit more about that?
I read the paper on it. Okay, let me just get my notes in the paper. It's very interesting. So basically, what this antibiotic is targeting is lipids. So lipids are essentially highly conserved in the membrane of a bacteria. And the reason why they have to be conserved is that if you change the lipid structure, you're altering not only just the charge of the cell, you're making the cell more leaky. You can lead to cell lysis and damage. So they have to conserve this lipid. This lipid can't change. So by targeting this lipid, it's quite a very novel method. And
so essentially, for people who don't know, cell lysis is when the cell splits, isn't it? Exactly. So what you're saying is your cell has got this membrane. The thing that encloses the cell is made of lipids, and so you're targeting that lipid to cause it to split.
You're targeting specifically two types of lipids, creatively named lipid 2 and lipid 3.
Scientists with geniuses, creativity.
Aren't they? Yeah.
But it's really interesting. And also, the reason why we're having this discovery now is that there's a new technology out at the moment called an eye chip. So do you know about petri dishes? You put some bacteria on the petri dish with a certain nutrient broth. But there's a sort of an old saying of to culture is to disturb, and growth in these sort of conditions can lead to sort of odd circumstances. But there's a technology they're using called eye chips. So it's eye for isolation. So it's composed of a chip which has several hundred miniature diffusion chambers, and so each chamber is so small you can fit a single cell. And the advantage of this is that you can target what are called uncultured bacteria, or bacteria that you can't really grow in the lab. You could sort of going back to what they tried to do in the 60s is where they tried to screen soil microorganisms. So obviously very exciting.
I've seen this referred to as the bacteria hotel.
Really?
There are some great pictures of it. There are some great pictures.
That's brilliant.
Right. So we definitely do have alternatives, is what you're saying. There are no
but I don't want to sound over optimistic.
No, as you said, it's overly targeted.
So I guess one important thing is that we can take part in this sort of evolutionary arms race, or we can look at other things such as how we use antibiotics.
Yes, I want to talk about this.
Behavior. And sort of it's very much sort of a placebo effect it's often used for. So
I'm going to give what is the worst example of this, and then you can use that almost as an analogy, if you like, to talk around this. The biggest reason, one of the biggest reasons why this is such a threat, is actually something that's happening on the African continent, which is quite literally the West will fly over crates and crates and crates and crates of general antibiotics.
Yes.
And then there's no real instruction on how to use them, and they're just by the handful.
Yes.
This
is right throughout Asia as well, isn't it?
It is.
Yes.
And it's that level of usage that is actually the biggest threat, because if you develop something that is antibiotic resistant, if you think about some of the diseases on the African continent, we all know some really horrible ones,
genuine dangerous,
and if that sort of thing, which we don't have any level of immunity to, which we don't really have
no exposure to anyway,
if that were to become antibiotic resistant, admittedly you've got a significant climate change to get from
Yes,
Africa
but at the same time,
here.
you have complete immunity to all broad-spectrum antibiotics.
It would be very bad. So what is wrong with that approach to using antibiotics, Ben?
Okay, so I guess the antibiotics often aren't specific to the disease that the individual has. It's not being effective, and so I guess that is very much wasteful, and you can. And I guess it's the behaviour by which you use the antibiotic. A lot of people don't complete their sort of prescription, and so eventually what's left, people say, "Oh, I feel fine. I'm gonna stop taking this antibiotic," even though there's sort of still a pool left. And there's certain, I don't really know much. Microbiology isn't my strongest point, but there certain bacteria can harness like a sort of spore version of themselves that can persist, and if you don't tackle bacteria, if you don't complete your prescription, if you don't use the right antibiotic, this sort of subpopulation will persist.
Yeah.
And what you see is that as the population decreases, the frequency or the proportion of bacteria that have resistance will increase, and so as the population increases again, we get more resistance.
So really, we need to have a much closer look at the way in which we use the resources that we already have available, the way we use the bank of antibiotics we already have. So what sort of changes need to be made there?
Well, I guess it's, a variety of levels. I'm immediately trying to think of sort of NHS, the way we approach it. I think ultimately the key word, education. People going to say their GP, I want this to feel better. They need to understand why it won't help. They need to understand why they need to do things a certain way.
Right.
And I think people aren't stupid. They just haven't been presented with the certain ideas.
Well, can I bring something in here? Something I want your opinion on is that often doctors will prescribe antibiotics to something that they know is a virus, but they prescribe it as a placebo effect. I think you've mentioned that.
Yeah.
Just because people want some kind of assurance, they want something, but you might as well give them sugar pills. I think we've mentioned this before on the previous shows.
Not only is it not making any positive difference, it's having the negative
effect. It has a detrimental effect.
Increasing
so
antibiotic
there is no medicinal difference. It is purely for psychological effect, to assuage your patient, essentially to make them go away, and it generally can have a placebo effect. But how do you think that it should be regulated in that sense from a doctor's perspective? Because of course people genuinely do demand antibiotics. They will return to the doctor and demand, even though it couldn't possibly help them.
If you have a virus.
Yes, if you have a virus, you have a cold, and they say, well, give me them now. People may essentially rebel and feel that they have a right to some kind of treatment, whether or not it's actually effective.
Well, again, I do honestly believe it comes back to education, and previously I was talking about educating the patient. I think educating the doctor as well. The doctors aren't perfect people. They have a lot of clinical knowledge. I don't know how much sort of scientific understanding they have. So, say for example, if a GP did their training in the 80s, the 70s, now I'm not sure how much ideas they'll know about antibiotic resistance.
That's very
so
interesting.
It's important that everyone is is aware of this information, so then they can apply it and
yeah,
understand.
Definitely. I think that's a good point, and it's not something that's usually addressed. The fact that doctors are fallible, and they do come across a broad spectrum of educational backgrounds and knowledge bases.
Expect an awful lot of them.
Usually you're just referred to as the doctors, the medical establishment, as though it's a cohesive body of uniform knowledge.
Which it isn't. Nothing ever
no,
is.
absolutely,
it's
it's not at all.
Okay. So, can science save us from antibiotic resistance?
Well,
actually,
I would say
not really the
not
science. We just need to educate people with the science.
We do.
An idea of we don't really have to take part in the evolutionary arm race all the time. This idea of de-escalation, this idea of education. I think I'm optimistic.
Good.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Oh, you're optimistic. Good, because I felt I've been terrified for weeks.
Well, something I can very quickly mention is I went to a lecture about a few years ago in Cambridge about a mathematician who works in Texas on knot theory, and she was working on this enzyme called topoisomerase 2, which has the ability to essentially break open the circular DNA of bacteria and prevent them from of dividing. I can't remember. Was it parthenogenesis? I think it is, isn't it? The method of division. I can't quite remember. But essentially, yes, this is a way of using applied mathematics to combat bacteria.
Yeah.
So there are alternative means, even if all of this fails.
So there is hope. We just actually need to get our act together.
Yes.
And start doing what we know is the right thing to do. Keyan, you've done quite a lot of. Let's go into a slightly different. Let's talk about a different one. You've done a fair. I've chatted to you, and you seem to have looked into it a bit. You know some stuff about cosmic rays and solar flares and the effect that might have. Do you want to chat to us? What are we talking about here? As in, what is the threat to humanity here?
So, cosmic rays are, as you probably know, the outburst of particles from suns, stars, and other bodies such as supernovae, maybe.
I see. Yeah.
Which involve alpha particles, protons, electrons, possibly as well, and they have a very bad effect on the Earth and the magnetic.
So these are charged particles moving very, very quickly.
So essentially, it's a soup of charged particles moving through space, and they will interact with the Earth's magnetosphere.
So very, very qualitatively, because we don't have time to talk about electrodynamics on the radio.
No, not quite.
What's going on here is when you have these really fast charged particles, whenever a charge moves, it generates a magnetic field, and so you end up with what we call a magnetic storm in the Earth's field because of this sudden increase in the flux of these charged particles. And that can have two effects. One being, you were telling me about this earlier, Harry, when you and I think you mentioned this to me earlier as well, that if you completely wipe out the magnetic field, then suddenly you've left whatever life is on the surface of the planet completely open to
essentially the harmful radiation which is always passing towards from the sun. So talking about especially ultraviolet rays, X-rays, these kind of things.
And so Ben and Harry, you were talking about one of the extinctions that happened that we think is exactly because of this.
Yes. Well, there's one theory. I mean, we're never really going to be truly.
No, I think it is quite a new explanation with regard to explaining it. It's the Permian extinction, which occurred approximately 500 million years ago, I believe, which occurred just before the Triassic period, and it wiped out approximately 89% of life.
That's a lot of life.
Yes, it's the biggest extinction in history, and the onus is currently placed on an enormous gamma ray burst from an extragalactic source.
Yeah. The other way in which this is really, really bad for humanity is we have communications.
Yes, absolutely.
And we have power grids.
Yes.
And the way power is generated is you rotate wires in a magnetic field, and so as soon as you have very fast-moving charged particles generating a magnetic field, that's going to interact with the wires that we have our power through. And in 1989, Quebec lost all of its power because of a solar event that interrupted.
Indeed, I think we were talking about this before, because we also have, around once a century, our sun will release an enormous coronal mass ejection, which is similar to a cosmic ray in the way that it's a stream of charged particles and it will interact with the Earth's magnetosphere. So the last one occurred about 100 years ago, so of course in these kind of events, as you always say, we're due for another one. But we have no experience of how this will actually affect our power grids, because 100 years ago, all we had were very basically implemented power grids and telegraph networks.
Like that goes down, you're not dependent on it.
We had no satellites, we have no idea how that will affect them. So we had no real international power grids like we do now. We know we're connected essentially under the channel to Europe through our power grid. Also telecoms, the internet, we had none of this, so we have no idea how this future coronal mass ejection from the sun will affect us.
And so while we're not really talking about an extinction, I mean, you are in the first case when the magnetosphere gets so heavily disrupted that you're then open to all of the damaging radiation from space. That could be, but what we're talking about here is a complete loss of power and an almost complete loss of communication.
Yes.
So what would you do in that situation? Would you turn off the grid beforehand?
You wouldn't know. You wouldn't know it was coming. Really.
Essentially, what there are plans from ESA, I believe. They're going to create a network of satellites. This is quite speculative, and they're finding it hard to fund. But they're going to place satellites at the Lagrangian points, which will then monitor the sun's output, and maybe it will buy us a few minutes. And there are plans to build new power grids called smart grids, which will essentially bud off the power grid in the few minutes, you'll essentially isolate lots of little cells throughout the country, and you'll minimise damage because you won't get the transmission of these enormous short circuit bursts.
It's very difficult to try and work out that something like this is going to happen.
Yes, it's impossible to predict. Something else I want to weigh in here is a little bit of research I found earlier by a new paper, is that magnetic pole reversal, which is the tendency of the Earth's magnetic field to flip over.
And it's wobbling anyway.
Yes, it's wobbling at the moment. So current research indicates that it could happen within a single human lifetime. And it occurs about every 500,000 years, and the last one occurred about 40,000 years ago. So we have a while to worry about this. But as you said, it wobbles all the time, and this current modelling suggests that it can significantly disrupt the magnetosphere far more than we thought before.
Really?
So this can have exactly the same effects that we were just talking about from solar flares, coronal mass ejections, cosmic rays. So our own magnetic field can essentially disrupt itself just through its ordinary operation.
So honestly, I think we would both agree as physicists in terms of this sort of thing, can science save? It's not a question of can you be saved, it's more just damage control.
Yes. Okay, right.
Because
this is something we're just going to have to live with.
Yeah.
This is a fact of the Earth's nature. It's built with a magnetosphere which is susceptible to perturbation, and we're just going to have to live with it.
I mean, Harry here is very interested in plasma physics.
Yes.
So from what you've read around plasma physics, obviously it's a huge field.
Yes.
But to some degree, the sun is such a complicated object.
Yes, it is. It's incredibly dynamic.
How much would you be able to tell if something like this was on its way?
Well, so usually you have these coronal mass ejections which move almost at the speed of light. So solar flares move a bit slower, but coronal mass ejection, yes, because of the incredible activity of the sun, the magnetic forces are enormous, so any matter ejected is pretty much moving as fast as anything can move. Yeah. So if you, as I said, these satellites which we're planning to build at the Lagrangian point, so they'll be within the orbit of Venus or something like that.
They're just, in case you didn't know, they're just stationary gravitational points. So you put something there and it will basically stay there.
Yes. Okay, right. We can essentially park satellites closer to the sun than the Earth, and they'll sit in a nice little place for us. So they may be able to buy us a few minutes at most if they can accurately detect some kind of emission which is heading for Earth. So as we said, best case scenario, we're going to buy ourselves 2 to 3 minutes advance warning.
So in the first case, antibiotic resistance, can science save us? We've already got basically what we need. We just need to start using it effectively.
We are being saved, I guess.
Yeah. And then in this case of coronal mass ejection or cosmic rays or highly energetic particles, it's not really a question of can we be saved, it's just damage control.
Damage control.
Right.
Okay, Harry, let's break for a song and then we'll come back. And I think we should talk about bees, because this is a very relevant to now example.
It is indeed. Okay, so we're going to break for a little bit of Codaline, ladies and gentlemen. This is Honest.
And we're back. You are listening to Because the Universe with me, Matt Lane, and him, Harry Manners. And we're talking about, we're asking the question of, can science save us?
We are indeed.
So we're looking at those things, whether they're natural, whether they're obscure or obvious, that could be a real threat to humanity. And then we're asking the question, do they have scientific solutions? Or is this just damage control?
Yes.
And so far we've looked at 2 examples. We've got Ben and Keyan in the studio to help us out. And we've looked at antibiotic resistance.
We have, yeah. We've
basically said, what was it we concluded there, Ben?
So it's going to be a combination of de-escalation, changing our behaviour, how we use antibiotics, but also taking part in a sort of an arms race, using different techniques to try and tackle the problem.
So we kind of concluded that the science is there.
Yep.
And it's more just we need to use it appropriately.
Yes.
Yeah. And then we looked at the example of coronal mass ejection and cosmic radiation and the effect that an event like that could have on the power grid and on communication. And Keyan, what did we really conclude with that one?
Well, we plunged into the dark ages pretty much, just damage control. Trying to reduce the amount of damage that.
So really, it's not something that the science can save us from. It's more just something, like you say, damage control.
Not at the moment, anyway.
Not at the moment. Right, so we've only got 5 minutes really left. So we're gonna touch on what looks like a small scale problem, but actually is really the most relevant crisis to right now. And we're gonna look at bees. We're gonna look at bees. So we're gonna talk about something
Bumblebees.
that is called colony collapse disorder.
Colony collapse disorder.
Yeah, CCD.
Okay, I have not heard of this.
Have you not?
No.
Which is basically beekeepers, before 2006, they were reporting a decrease in the number of bees per annum by about 5 to 10%.
Right.
2006, it was recorded at 30% decrease in bee population. And it's now being reported at 40 to 50% every year. It's the population of bees that we're
50%.
losing.
Right.
That's incredible.
So these are our main pollinators. This is where we're getting our crops from. I've got some figures from the States here. $15 billion worth of crops are directly pollinated by bees.
Wow.
That's a third of all food and 90 million flowering crops.
Okay.
That's a terrifying
obviously,
statistic.
Yeah.
This is serious. And what's actually being reported is you open up your hive, you've got a queen, you've got a fair few young bees, child bees, if you like, and no adults. The adults, there's no bodies. They're just gone. So they've left the hive.
And died.
And died and haven't come back.
Wow. Is there some kind of explanation?
Yes, there is. Enough studies have been done of hives, sort of chemical trace studies, and there's 150 different chemical residues from pesticides and herbicides that you can find when you look in a hive. Okay. And while they may all independently, sometimes questionably, be you may say, actually, yes, this is safe. Mm-hmm. Very few studies have been done on how they would interact or what would happen if you had multiple examples of these chemicals in your system.
I see.
Particularly nicotine-based compounds. Now, we know nicotine is an addictant. By its very definition, it does things to the way your brain functions.
Yes.
And so what's been proposed is that essentially nicotine, which is the key ingredient in a great many, I can't remember whether it's herbicides or pesticides. Anyway, it was a neonicotine study,
right?
And what they essentially said was they gave bees a dose on the order of what you would expect from these trace samples in hives,
right?
And found they were 2 to 3 times more likely to die when they left the hive. The reason was they'd forgotten how to get home. The effect the nicotine had on the bee was it knocked out their homing instinct.
That's wow. Because, of course, it's an incredible feat of nature, isn't it? A bee's ability to find its way back to the hive. Yeah. It's something that's quite often quoted as one of the marvels of nature.
And then communicate.
Yes, I think I believe it's based on pheromone signals. Is that right? Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So
it's the same with wasps. Like if you kill a wasp, run.
Yes,
because all the other wasps know.
Yes. I see. So
we see it in the news upon occasion. Bees, and everyone kind of goes, look at those hippie scientists.
But this has been
interested in the bees.
No, didn't Einstein once?
Did he say something about bees? It wouldn't surprise me because it's not new science at all.
No, not at all. Because I think one of his more well-known quotes is all kind of, you can worry as much as you want about the Armageddon and all of the kind of things, but if we lose the bumblebee, then that's that.
Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing. He doesn't speak like that, right? But yes, essentially, so this is a very old idea, and it's something people have known for a long time. But these statistics are real.
They are real.
That's an incredible
2 to 3
decrease.
times more likely to die. And that's just with the nicotine. I've said you've got 150 different trace residues.
That's amazing.
In your hive.
And so this is a third of our food.
It is
in question here.
It's really bad. So there has been an EU-wide ban on neonicotines.
Good.
The US. So this is hilarious. The EU have banned it. What the US are doing is they're suing the Environmental Protection Agency.
Oh, that's excellent.
Don't even get started. Listen to some of the previous radio shows where we've talked about the Environmental Protection Agency and the ridiculousness of the policies being passed to prevent them from doing the job they're meant to do.
Absolutely, yes.
It's just craziness.
Yeah.
And what the pesticide people are saying is they're saying the science is on our side. That's a quote from a report. What science it is they're referring to, I'm not entirely sure.
No, this is another example of science as an external thing as opposed to
exactly
a group of
whatever
people.
it actually is.
Yeah.
Distorting the data very much.
Can science save us from that?
That's a tough one. I think. Can there be anything that does the job of the bumblebee? Can we replace it some way? Can we breed it in culture?
It's evolved to do that job,
this is a question really of bioengineering, isn't it? Because maybe you could replace it with some kind of hydroponics operation, but it'd have to be on a global scale. You'd have to paper your city's walls with it, which is it's quite a utopian idea. So that's an old idea of essentially carpeting cities in lawn. Lawn crops, and using the enormous heat nuts or
Alternatively,
CTs and things.
we could just change our legislation to mean that we're able to have more GMO crops,
Yes.
so that they are already resistant to those things which you're spraying pesticides and herbicides on, and then stop using the pesticides and
Indeed.
herbicides.
And again, this is a matter of education once again.
Completely.
So
Because the legislation in the States makes no sense. at all.
Absolutely. So legislation on GMO is incredibly. It's almost
GMO, in
it's
case anyone doesn't know, genetically modified organism.
Yes. So essentially, it's almost fundamentally based on public opinion,
Yep.
which is wrong. I think we can safely
Since
say.
public opinion of science is
Yes,
just
it's just
diving in
it's
the
simply
States.
uninformed. It's just
Yep.
a mass aggregate of people who simply don't know what they're talking
Yeah.
about. And it's completely understandable because people are afraid of what they don't understand.
So can science save us? The sort of situations we've looked at the colony collapsed. Oh, it's terrifying.
It is.
That's going on, and that's probably the worst. I mean, it's the smallest, but it's probably the worst.
That is
Isn't
something
it?
that could just genuinely extinguish us, gone. And if we don't, it's something that's insidious in that
Yeah.
it's not quite sensationalist enough.
Yeah, and
Yes.
then we've looked at antibiotic resistance.
We have.
And we said we can already be saved. We just need to actually do things right.
Very much so. Yes.
And then also we looked at coronal mass ejection and cosmic rays and said, whoops,
Oops.
damage control.
Yes. Nothing we can do there.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Ben
Yes.
and Keyan, for coming on and talking about Can Science Save Us with us. This is
You've been wonderful.
Matt Lane and Harry Manners on
We
Because
are.
the Universe. We'll be back in 2 weeks.
We will
with
indeed.
2 more guests and another topic.
Kind of
I mean,
great
there are so
topic.
many things that we didn't talk about today.
Yeah.
There's a brilliant infographic of all the things that could
That's
kill us.
it. Look on the website,
I'll
everyone.
post it on Facebook.
Fantastic. Okay, so I think we're going to go out on Illuminate by
Brilliant.
Tourist.
Have a good weekend.
Have a great one, everyone.
It's me again. Thank you for listening to Because the Universe. Remember that our next show will be on in 2 weeks' time from whenever you were last listening. And do email us at becausetheuniverse@aol.com if you would be interested in coming on to a show. We would love to have you with us.